I've got a new challenge for Joe Biden and the executive branch. I call it the do literally anything challenge. And it's very easy to beat. You just have to do literally anything as president. And there's a whole category of stuff that he's unfortunately not gonna be able to beat this challenge with. And that would be anything legislative, because we as a country did the COVID aid bill like a month into his presidency or less. And then there was a hate crimes bill. And then that's it. That's it for months and months and months and months and months. And there was supposed to be a voting bill, but that's never gonna happen because they're not gonna get rid of the filibuster. And we have an infrastructure bill, maybe someday that will be passed. But my point here is, and we're gonna be giving a couple examples of things that he could be working on, is that if you cannot achieve much of anything legislatively because of Sinema or Manchin or Tester or the Republicans or the filibuster or whatever, then I'm really gonna need you to do something with the powers that you do have. And as president, I looked into it and there are some things he can do, Brett. And so I think it would be nice to reassure us that, yeah, he's just as frustrated with the Senate as we are, but he's not gonna let that cripple his presidency. He would do something, and right now he very much isn't. Although in a minute, we're gonna go through a few of the things that he could do.
Yes, one very interesting place to visit on the internet that I discovered yesterday or 2 days ago when we were doing production for the Power Hour with Senator Nina Turner. We kind of talked about this a little bit in the growing chorus of people calling for the president to do literally anything. There's PolitiFact has a Biden promise tracker that you can go and track all of Biden's promises. So if you just Google Biden promise tracker, they have everyone set up. They give you a status on where it is, and you'll see a staggeringly low number of promises have been delivered on. And another place to look for that is like right now we're caught up on HR 3, like the third House resolution. We're on 3. We can't get that one. We're thinking about 4, trying to get 4. Can I get a 4th? 1 or 2 a year, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff about the Christian creation myth. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But one thing that does make sense is that when God rests, which is weird, he's all powerful and everything, he rests after creating everything. Biden's launching into it. He made like gophers and ficuses, and then he's like, I'm good for a year. I'm gonna take some time off. But anyway, let's get into a couple of things that he could do, that he has made promises on. So one is looking into what can be done with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is broken in a whole bunch of different ways. And not everyone thinks that he should do literally anything to change the Supreme Court, but in theory he could, and he's expressed interest in it. In fact, back in April, he began a commission to look into possible court expansion or other reforms. And it has been months and months and months, and we don't have the final draft report. We have like an interim report. And they say, as a legal matter, we conclude that Congress has broad power to structure the Supreme Court by expanding or contracting the number of justices. That's actually a spicy little addition there, the contracting. But anyway, the prudential question is more difficult, and commissioners are divided on whether court expansion would be wise. And here is what they say to that point. The commission laid out a number of factors to be considered, including ways it would impact the judicial system, how the political timing would affect the court's independence, and the example it would set for other countries that could use it to justify tampering with their own judicial systems. They say that it could undermine rather than enhance the Supreme Court's legitimacy and its role in the constitutional system. And there are significant reasons to be skeptical that expansion would serve democratic values. And coming out of that, it's not the final report, maybe they'll change it, but I feel like if it was like, we looked into it and it's just a great idea, there's no downsides, I feel like he still wouldn't do it. With this interim report, there ain't no way he's doing any reform to it. I mean, we wouldn't want to undermine its legitimacy, which is just so sterling right now. Everybody loves what it's doing, and clearly it's set up in a way that reflects what average people want. Thoughts, Brett?
This is a doctor's note. This is like one of those notes that lets you bring your dog on a plane, but it's not like a guide dog, right? Like, I just need to get someone to write up an excuse for me, a very official looking excuse that they can hand to me that I can pass on to whoever wants me to hand in my book report today so I don't have to go to school. Like that's what it is. And that's where we are actually. This isn't the only issue where we're like waiting on a memo write-up to see if we can deliver on something that folks really, really want. Now, I think the packing the Supreme Court is one of those things that like cries danger to me. I think abolishing the filibuster is like the wrong angle on stuff to take. I think those are the slippery slope arguments that like until the Democrats prove they can shore up all the other leaks in democracy, if they just change the filibuster rule and don't promise to then change voting rights laws on a federal level and be assured that they can get that through a Supreme Court, like the Democrats are just gonna set themselves up to get their butts whooped because Republicans still control so much of the voting apparatus in America disproportionate to themselves. So this is a different thing. Okay. But thematically talking about this, like Ilhan Omar just released a document and had like 18 people in Congress sign it saying, Biden, when it comes to student debt, we're still waiting, not just on your decision for student debt, but on a memo you promised you'd eventually write to explain whether you could do the student debt stuff that you promised.
Yeah, so don't you worry, we're gonna get into that. And look, I understand that what you said about the slippery slope. I don't necessarily share the same level of fear because
knowledge of the political system. Got it.
And that mostly knowledge of the political. I don't know, where am I? But I've seen how the Republicans function, what they want to achieve, and the fact that they've already carved out every path necessary to get done what they want when they're in the presidency. But anyway, I would say simply expanding the court and leaving everything else the same is not the only thing that you can do. A couple years back, John Oliver had a great episode of his show on reform of the Supreme Court, and he talked about one of the plans, which is that every president gets a certain number of appointments that cannot be unilaterally blocked if Mitch McConnell feels like it. You serve an 18-year term, so there is some friction to the court, but you don't just throw on a 31-year-old radical so that you can stop anything from happening for the next 40 years. That whole sort of thing. You don't have to have people wondering like, are they gonna retire? Oh God, are they gonna retire? There's some predictability. It isn't, like you serve 8 years and you get one justice, Trump comes in and he reshapes half the court. This makes a ton of sense. And it is not simply, we're gonna put more people on. It would influence every president in the future, Republican as well as Democratic. But as you say, you also brought up the student loan debt thing, because that is, to me, that's the slam dunk. He promised he would do it. There is widespread support for it. It is a massive crisis. Chuck Schumer is supportive of it, as well as Elizabeth Warren. He said he would look into it, and he definitely has the power. And when so little else is being done, it would be a sign that he actually cares. He gets the obligation he has to make good on some of his promises, and he's willing to do it. But instead, he's just waiting. Back in April, again, April was a big month for making promises. They said they would do this memo that you referenced. They said, Ron Klain said at the time that it would be released in a matter of weeks. I guess that's true if you consider 30 or 40 a matter of weeks. It's been 6 months since then. And so Representative Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as well as a number of other progressives in the House have pushed for the release of the memo that was supposed to be being done, a 6-month term paper on whether you could legally do this that they still haven't released. And they're pushing for that to happen. And that would be such an easy one, so popular. And so far, no, 6 months. He's off doing God knows what. He's getting boosters occasionally, and that's pretty much it. I don't see much else from him other than that.
Yeah, and I wish I could remember the total number, but there was an analysis of what this would do to the GDP, and it would add like $100 billion to the GDP if you canceled student debt. And then you have to ask yourself, like, why
$1 trillion in total student loan debt, which, as they point out in the letter, is almost exactly the amount that billionaires made back after the initial shock through the course of the pandemic.
Yeah. So, yes. It's very frustrating because why isn't he handing it out at all? Like it's done. You can't tell me it's not done. Just hand over your work, show me your work. And what it's probably gonna say is something that we all need to really understand as a central theme of American politics. There are plenty of things you can do, and frequently they like to give an excuse that it's outside their power. And frequently these things are ambiguous, and you either, if you want to do it, you either want to do it or you don't. If you do want to do it, then you are going to look at that ambiguity and use it to your advantage. And if you don't want to do it, you're going to look at that ambiguity and say something we've heard before when I say like, the parliamentarian told me I couldn't. So all of these are not indicators of whether or not they can. They're indicators of whether or not they want to.
Yeah, and look, we have to move on, but other things he could work, like there's a lot of executive power over potentially internationalizing vaccine patents would be great, putting more funding into distributing it internationally. We had talk about pressuring on filibuster reform, because again, it doesn't have to be things that he signs a piece of paper and it's done. You could see him vigorously arguing for things that he's not currently right now. Pushing for mint the coin to avoid constant needless battles over the debt ceiling increase and all of that. So
I think they need to immediately shift the filibuster discussion to like, no, real filibuster. I want to hear it.
Yeah, hashtag force the buster. That's what I was pushing for yesterday. If you wanna, next week they're gonna bring up the voting rights bill and it's gonna be filibustered, and Chuck Schumer's gonna be like, oh, okay, fine, then we're fine. That's really unpopular what you're doing, but I'm gonna cover for you by just moving on. Don't
change, and that requires changing the not the spirit of the rule, but like the rule itself. It is so ridiculous. It's like instead of having to like play the game and fight the fight, like have the Giants play the Dodgers. It's like them saying, well, we would have a game, but it would be too intense. And that's what cloture is. Cloture is a vote saying that we're gonna end debate. But they don't have to have that debate and then end it. They need to bring back the, Mr. Smith goes to Washington filibuster and have these guys show up and tell all of America for 16 hours, 30 hours, 50 hours, 2 weeks, why they don't want you to vote. And I want to hear it. Let's hear it. Let's hear all your stupid excuses, because I got a feeling at a certain point you're gonna stop giving us your rehearsed commentary and start reading from the phone book.
Yeah, 100%. Let it be unpopular and have it actually hurt them.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.